Hello, students. Welcome to our first lecture of the course Principles of Political Science. Today's lecture is on Introduction to Political Science, Meaning and Definition. Before we dive into the content, let me walk you through what we will cover today. This will help you stay focused on track. We'll begin by understanding the meaning of political science, what this subject is all about, and why it matters. Then we'll trace its etymology, going back to ancient Greek civilization. After that, we will take up modern definitions, starting with classical definitions by thinkers like Aristotle and Kautilya. We move to modern definitions by thinkers like Harold Laswell and David Easton. We'll also examine the nature of political science, whether it is art or science or it is both. Why it is so, we will discuss the arguments in favor of science and discipline being art. We'll distinguish between politics and political science, a term commonly confused by these students. We'll briefly survey the scope of the discipline of political science and discuss why studying political science matters, especially in the Indian context. Finally, we will connect everything to contemporary society, and it sets the foundation for everything ahead. Keep your minds open, take notes, and feel free to ask any questions at any point. Let us begin this intellectual journey together with the genuine curiosity and enthusiasm. Let us start with the most basic question. What exactly is political science? The term may seem complex first, but it is quite straightforward when broken down. Political science is the systematic study of politics, government power, and state. It helps us understand how societies are organized, how decisions are made collectively, and how authority is exercised. Every day we hear about election, government policies, law, court judgments, and international relations. Political science is the academic discipline that helps us make sense of these events in a structured and logical way. The word systematic is very important here. Unlike casual discussions about politics in daily life, political science allows a structured methodology. It asks questions, gathers evidences, builds theories, and draws conclusions. It is concerned not just with what is happening in politics, but also with what should happen, meaning it has both a descriptive and normative dimension. In India, political science helps us understand how parliament functions, how our constitution works, why federalism matters, and how democracy evolved since 1947. This is not an abstract discipline, or this is not an abstract subject. It is deeply concerned to our live realities as a citizen of a democratic republic. Always keep this practical connection in mind as we move forward through today's lecture. To truly understand political science, we must trace the origin of the word itself, a process called etymology. The word politics comes from the ancient word polis, which means city-state. In ancient Greece, particularly in Athens, the polis was the primary unit of political organization. Citizens participated directly in government and decision-making process. They were governing directly the polis, the city-state, through open assemblies. Laws were made, justice was delivered, and decisions about war and peace were taken collectively in this framework. The related Greek word politikos referred to anything concerning citizens and affairs of the city-state. From these roots, the Latin word politicus emerged, and eventually in the English language, we got the word politics. The word science comes from the Latin scientia, meaning knowledge. So political science literally means systematic knowledge of political affairs, the organized study of the polis and its governance. This etymology teaches us something about something very important. Political science has always been about community life, how human beings organize themselves, how do they make decisions, how do they govern their shared existence. Even thousands of years after ancient Athens, this core connection remains the same. The historical root of the word gives our subject a timeless quality that connects ancient wisdom to modern governance, reminding us that a question we ask today are as old as civilization itself. Let us now look at the first formal definition of political science. Credit goes to the great Greek philosopher Aristotle, who lived from 384 to 322 BCE. Aristotle is widely called the father of political science. In his landmark work Politics, he made a famous observation: man is by nature a political animal. This statement is absolutely foundational to our subject. What did Aristotle mean? He meant that human beings are not designed to live in isolation. We are social creatures who naturally form communities, and within those communities, we create systems of governance, justice, and authority. For Aristotle, the polis was the highest form of human community, and politics was the master science governing all other human activities. He believed the purpose of the state was to promote good life, what he called eudaimonia, meaning well being and flourishing for its citizens. So, this is a normative vision. Aristotle did not just describe politics, he asked what politics ought to do, ought to accomplish. In the Indian context, we can compare this to directive principles in our constitution that put a responsibility on the state to improve the quality of life of citizens, to take care of the welfare and social justice. Aristotle's definition remains relevant today because it reminds us that politics is fundamentally about improving human life and ensuring the well being of all members of society. Since it is the state that used to control, the kind of state that Greek society was having was a totalitarian state, a state that had total control over the life of an individual from cradle to grave, and therefore every aspect of human life, be it economic, education, cultural, or social or political, was controlled and directed and governed by state. And political science is the study of state and government, and therefore it was called as the master science because it is this discipline that studies an institution which controls every aspect of human life. While Aristotle gave us the most celebrated classical definition, other classical thinkers equally shaped our understanding of political science. Let us begin with Plato, Aristotle's teacher, who lived from 428 to 348 BCE. In his famous work, The Republic, Plato explored the concept of the ideal state. For Plato, the ideal ruler was a philosopher king, someone who possesses both wisdom and virtue. He believed political power should rest with those who have knowledge and moral excellence, and therefore he talks about philosopher kings who go through a rigorous study of philosophy and mathematics, and they keep on studying even after 50 years. Rather, they become philosopher kings after, say, 50 years, and with strict isolation of life. Plato talks about communism of wife and property, denial of family and private property to the philosopher king so that they can maintain the highest level of ethics and morality, avoiding all those institutions that may lead to perversion, that may lead to corruption. Plato saw political science as the study of justice, governance, and the organization of the ideal community. We cannot ignore, his approach was philosophical and idealistic. Now move to the Indian tradition. We cannot ignore Kautilya, also known as Chanakya, who who lived in 4th century BCE. His masterpiece, the Arthashastra, is one of the world's oldest treatises on statecraft, economic policy, and military strategy. Kautilya defined politics in practical terms, maintaining order, security, and prosperity for the kingdom. This is the responsibility that he puts on the king also. His work, the biggest duty of the king is to take care of the people, welfare of the people, prosperity of the people. He is often compared to Machiavelli of the West because of the realistic approach to political power. Together, Plato and Kautilya show the richness of classical political thought. Each approaches the state differently, yet both acknowledge that understanding political life is essential for civilization and for ensuring justice and stable order. These thinkers laid the foundation on which all later political science was built. Now, let us move from classical to modern times. One of the most influential modern definitions of politics was offered by Harold Laswell, an American political scientist who lived from 1902 to 1978. His famous work is titled Politics: Who Gets What, When, How, published in 1936. Laswell defined politics is as in an extremely practical and memorable way. According to him, politics is essentially about the distribution of values in society. It answers three questions: who gets, what he gets, when and how he gets it. Uh, this shifts the focus from the abstract study of the state to practical questions of resource distribution and power. When the Indian government allocates funds for education, healthcare, or infrastructure, who benefits? Which regions are prioritized and through what mechanism? All of this is politics in Laswell's sense. Laswell also introduced the behavioral approach. He believed political science should study actual human behavior in political context, how people behave, what motivates them, and how they respond to power. This was a major departure from earlier approaches that studied only formal institutions of state and government. For the first time, discipline becoming anthropocentric, man centered, and studying or focusing his political behavior also. Thus, Laswell helped transform political science into a more empirical discipline, bringing it closer to scientific inquiry in terms of methodology. His work remains deeply relevant to policy analysis in contemporary government. Another very important modern thinker is David Easton, a Canadian American political scientist who lived from 1917 to 2014. Easton made a groundbreaking contribution by introducing the concept of political system. In his work, A Systems Analysis of Political Life, published in 1965, Easton defined politics as the authoritative allocation of values for a society. By authoritative, he meant decisions that are binding, which are backed by legitimate power, coercive power, which people are expected to obey and follow. By allocation of values, he meant the distribution of benefits, resources, and goods. This allocation must apply to the entire society and not just a particular group. What makes Easton's contribution unique is his systems of framework. He visualized the political system as a mechanism that receives inputs from society in the form of demands and support and converts them into output such as policies, laws, and decisions. This is the input output model given by David Easton. When citizens in India demand better public transportation, the government receives this as an input, processes it through institutions, and produces an input, perhaps a new metro policy. Easton's model helps us see political science as a dynamic, ongoing process rather than a static study of institution. It connects government action to social needs and expectations, making it one of the most practical frameworks for analyzing how political system functions in the real world. Beyond Laswell and Easton, several modern scholars have offered important definitions of political science. Paul Janet, a French philosopher, defined political science as the part of social science which treats the foundations of the state and the principles of government. This places our subject within the family of social sciences and highlights state and government as its central concerns. Robert Dell, an influential American political scientist, defined politics as any persistent pattern of human relationships involving, to a significant extent, power, rule, or authority. Dell's definition is broader. It recognizes that power relationship exist in many settings: families, workplace, communities, and civil institutions. This expanded view is very useful today when we study gender, caste, and class through a political lens. In the Indian context, Rajni Kothari argued that political science must address the unique realities of a plural democratic society with the deep social divisions. His work, Politics in India, published in 1970, is a landmark contribution, placing Indian democracy within its social and cultural context. These very definitions show us that political science is not a monolithic discipline with one fixed meaning. It is a living, evolving field that continuously adapts to new social realities, new theoretical frameworks, and new political changes across the world. The richness of our discipline lies precisely in the diversity of perspectives. One of the oldest and most debated questions in our discipline is political science really a science? This question has occupied scholars for centuries. Let us think about what science means. A science is a systematic study of knowledge based on observations, experimentations, and formulations of generalized laws. Natural sciences like physics and chemistry are clearly sciences. Their findings can be tested, verified, and reproduced under controlled conditions. Can political science do the same? The answer is both yes and no. Political science uses systematic observation and analysis. It collects data, studies patterns of political behavior, applies statistical tools, and builds theoretical models. In that sense, it has scientific characteristics, but important limitations exist. Human behavior is complex, unpredictable, and shaped by culture. The laboratory of political science is world, society, and the object of study is human being, highly flexible, fluid, subjective, changing every second, every minute, every hour. Factors like culture, history, and values are not only unpredictable, they cannot be controlled in a manner one can control the variables in a laboratory. Political science cannot conduct controlled experiments the way natural sciences can do. Moreover, political events are often unique historical occurrences. However, the behavioral revolution led by Laswell and Easton in the 1950s and 60s made serious efforts to increase disciplinary rigor and empirical precision. Today, political science uses both qualitative as well as quantitative methods. Most scholars agree that while it may not be a hard science, political science is certainly a systematic social science deserving full academic recognition. Continuing our discussion on the nature of political science, let us consider another dimension. Is it an art? Some scholars argue political science is more than art than science. This view rests on the observation that political understanding requires judgment, institutions, intuition, and wisdom, qualities associated more with art than scientific formula. A skilled statesperson must read complex human situations, make decisions under certainty, and inspire people, none of which can be reduced to equations. Classical thinkers like Plato and Aristotle saw political knowledge as connected to ethics and virtues. For them, the entire purpose of a state is to create moral values, create an ethical life in this world. For Aristotle, the study of politics was a practical wisdom, what he called phronesis, combining knowledge with good moral judgment. This is an artistic rather than purely scientific quality. In modern political science, the consensus is that the discipline has elements of both science and art. It uses scientific methods, surveys, case studies, statistical models, and comparative analysis to study political phenomenon objectively. At the same time, interpreting political events and understanding cultural context require qualitative judgments beyond data. In the Indian context, understanding caste-based voting requires both quantitative survey data and qualitative understanding of social hierarchies, a genuine combination of social science and art. Political science blends empirical rigor and interpretive depth, making it uniquely equipped to study complex political realities. Students often confuse politics with political science. Politics in everyday usage refers to real world activities, strategies, conflicts, and competition in governance and power. It includes elections, party rivalries, parliamentary debates, protests, lobbying, and the exercise of authority. When politicians campaign for vote, when the cabinet announces decisions, or when states negotiate treaties, that is politics with the real consequences for people. Political science, on the other hand, is a systematic academic study of these political activities. It steps back from day to day drama of politics and analyzes it critically, theoretically, and methodologically. Political science asks, why do elections produce certain outcomes? How do democracies differ from authoritarian systems? What makes constitution effective? A simple analogy. Politics is like what happens in a cricket match: the players, strategies, and outcomes. Political science is the academic study of cricket, the rules, history, statistics, and theory of the game. One is the phenomenon, the other is its systematic study. In the Indian context, a party's election strategy is politics, but an academic analysis of electoral pattern across Indian states using data and theory is political science. Both are important, but they operate at different levels of abstraction and serve different intellectual purposes. This distinction is fundamental to your study. While we have distinguished between politics and political science, it is equally important to understand that the two are closely related. With political science, we have already seen that political science draws its raw material from politics. Real events, real institutions, real conflicts, and real decisions provide the data and context that political science analyzes and interprets. Without real world politics, political science would have nothing to study. Conversely, politics benefits greatly from political science. Policymakers who understand theories of governance, democratic theory, and comparative politics are better equipped to make decisions and policies. In India, the drafting of the constitution is a perfect example. The framers studied constitutional models from the United States, United Kingdom, Ireland, and Canada before designing India's systems. This is political science directly informing actual politics. Moreover, political science produces knowledge applicable to solving real political problems. Studies on voter behavior inform electoral strategies. Research on administrative efficiencies guides bureaucratic reforms. Analysis of federalism helps manage center state relationship in complex democracies. So while the distinction between politics as a practice and political science as an academic exercise or study is conceptually important, in reality the two exist in a productive and continuous dialogue. Good politics benefits from good political science, and political science must stay grounded in actual political life. Together, they provide a complete picture of our political world. Let us now briefly discuss the scope of political science. The scope has expanded significantly from classical Greek to the modern period. Traditionally, political science was limited to the study of state and government, or moving a little ahead, sovereignty and law. Classical thinkers focused almost entirely on formal political institutions and constitutional arrangements. However, with the behavioral revolution in the 20th century, the discipline became anthropocentric. It included human behavior also. Today, political science covers several major areas. Political theory involves studying fundamental concepts like justice, rights, liberty, equality, and democracy, both classical and contemporary. Comparative politics involves comparing political systems, institutions, and processes across countries. For instance, comparing Indian democracy with American or French democracy reveals important design differences. International relations covers relations between states, the foreign policy of the countries, and international organizations like United Nations, global issues like terrorism and climate change. Public administration deals with the policy implementation and the functioning of bureaucracy. Public policy analyzes government decisions and their social consequences. In India, important sub areas include federalism, electoral politics, caste, constitutional law, and local governance. New areas like political economy, gender and politics, environmental governance, and digital politics have also entered the scope. Broad and expanding scope reflects the growing complexity of a modern political life and the discipline's remarkable capacity to adapt continuously. To appreciate how the scope of political science has evolved, let us compare the classical understanding with the modern one. In classical tradition, particularly in Greek thought, political science was essentially about studying the state and its governance. Aristotle's politics examined what is the best form of government, what conditions promote political stability, what causes revolution, how to prevent them. The state was seen as the supreme association, and everything within its boundaries was subject to political inquiry. State was the pivot around which the entire political science revolved, entire study revolved. Medieval thinkers like Thomas Aquinas blended political science or political thought with theology, focusing on the church state relationship and natural law as the basis of political authority. In modern times, the scope has expanded well beyond the state. Robert Dell argued that any persistent pattern of power and authority in families, workplace, communities, or civil society is a legitimate subject of political inquiry. Feminist thinkers showed that domestic spaces and personal relationships are also political arenas. The slogan, the personal is political, effectively challenged the traditional separation of public and private life. Environmental political scientists now examine how political systems respond to ecological crisis. In India, B.R. Ambedkar brought caste into the scope of political science, arguing that social hierarchy is a fundamentally political problem requiring political solution. This expansion reflects the recognition that political power operates across many dimensions of human life far beyond formal institutions. Address a question now which is very common and popular amongst the students. Why should we study political science? There are several compelling reasons. First, political science makes us informed and active citizens. In a democracy like India, every citizen has the right to vote, participate in governance, and hold the government accountable. But these rights can only be exercised meaningfully if citizens understand how their systems work, how laws are made, how parliament functions, and how elections are conducted. Political science provides this understanding. Second, it helps us critically evaluate government policies. When the government announces something, whether GST, democratization, demonetization, or reservation policy, political science gives us tools to analyze implications and identify who benefits and who is harmed. Third, political science develops critical thinking. It encourages students to question assumptions, examine power structures, and imagine alternatives, an invaluable skill far beyond academic life. Fourth, political science is directly relevant to careers in public administration, law, journalism, diplomacy, and NGO work. Many of India's great leaders, from Jawaharlal Nehru to B.R. Ambedkar, were deeply grounded in political thought. Studying political science is not merely an academic exercise. It is an investment in civic competence and democratic participation, qualities absolutely essential in a complex, diverse democracy like India, where informed citizens are the backbone of a healthy republic. Let us now connect political science specifically to the Indian democratic experience. India offers one of the most fascinating case studies in the entire world. We are the world's largest democracy with over 1.4 billion, extraordinary diversity in language, religion, caste, and culture, and a federal parliamentary system functioning for over 7 decades. Political science helps us understand several unique features of Indian democracy. First, our constitution, the longest written constitution in the world, embodies a careful balance of principles from multiple political traditions. Understanding it requires knowledge of constitutional theory and comparative political science. Second, the dynamics of Indian elections are endlessly interesting. How caste, religion, region, and class intersect in voting behavior, how parties mobilize support, and how the election commission maintains electoral integrity. These are rich areas of inquiry. Third, Indian federalism, the relationship between central and the state governments. It is a complex reality that political science helps us analyze systematically. Fourth, social movements, from the independence movements to Dalit rights to environmental activism, show how civil society shapes and challenges state power. Scholars like Rajni Kothari and B.R. Ambedkar made pioneering contributions to understanding Indian politics. For Indian students, political science is both an international discipline and one shaped by our own experiences, making it globally relevant and locally meaningful. Political science does not operate in isolation. It is deeply connected to other social sciences, and understanding these connections are as important to understand and appreciate its interdisciplinary nature. Political science and history share a very close bond. Historical events like wars, revolutions, colonial rules, and independent movements are the raw material through which political systems are interpreted. Without history, political science would lack essential context and depth. Political science and economics are intertwined through the field of political economy, which examines how economic interest shape political decisions and how government manages national economies. In India, debates about liberalization, privatization, and welfare schemes are simultaneously economic and political questions. Political science and sociology are closely related or linked because social structures, caste, class, gender, region, ethnicity profoundly influence political behavior, party systems, and political outcomes. Sociological concepts are very essential for understanding electoral democracy in diverse societies like India. Political science and psychology intersect in the study of political behavior, leadership, and public opinion. Uh, you know, Political science also engages deeply with law, specifically constitutional and administrative law, which form the formal framework of governance. These connections make political science a genuinely interdisciplinary field that enriches and is enriched by its relationship with other branches of knowledge, giving it analytical breadth and depth. Political science has never been more relevant than it is today. We live in a world of remarkable political complexity, rising authoritarianism, democratic backsliding, climate change, technological disruption, and deepening social inequalities. Political science provides frameworks to understand and respond to all these challenges. Consider democratic decline globally. In many countries, democracies face pressure from populist movements, disinformation campaign, and attacks on institutions. Political scientists study how democracies weaken, what conditions make them resilient, and what policies protect democratic norms in India, debates about freedom of expression, judicial independence, and minority rights are all deeply informed by political science. You see that climate change is fundamentally a political problem, while science it tells us what is happening to the environment. Political science explains why international agreements succeed or fail, how domestic interests resist regulation, and what governance structures enable effective action. The policy to control climate change, to make our environment more friendly, positive. What we need are the good policies and their good compliance, which is definitely a scope of political science. Well, political science is moving ahead in this era of technology. Digital politics is another urgent area. Social media has transformed political communication, mobilization, and disinformation. Understanding how algorithms shape political discourse and how states regulate digital spaces require political science deeply. In all these areas, political science equips citizens, scholars, and policy makers with knowledge to navigate rapid change with intelligence and democratic institutions. And of course, democratic commitments. The discipline is not merely academic, it is a practical guide for acting responsibly within our shared political world today. Before we conclude, let us consolidate the contributions of the key thinkers discussed today. This will help you retain the most important ideas from this lecture. Aristotle, the father of political science, defined politics as the master science concerned with achieving the good life for citizens within the polis. His observation that man is a political animal captures the essentially social and political nature of human existence. Plato contributed the vision of the ideal state governed by philosopher kings, emphasizing wisdom and justice as foundations of good government. Kautilya offered a pragmatic account of statecraft in the Arthashastra, anticipating many modern ideas about state power and, of course, international relations, peacemaking, etc. Harold Laswell revolutionized modern political science with his definition of politics as who gets what, when, and how, making resource distribution and power the central focus of political inquiry. His behavioral approach brought empirical rigor to the discipline. David Easton contributed the systems framework, viewing the political system as a process of input and output, making political science dynamic and practically relevant to governance. Robert Dell expanded the scope of political science beyond the state to include power relationship that can be seen not only vis-a-vis the state but also in families, communities, civil society, etc. In the Indian context, Rajni Kothari and B.R. Ambedkar brought political science into dialogue with India's social and political realities. Together, these thinkers built the rich tradition we now call political science. We have now reached the end of lecture. Let us quickly recap our journey today. We began by asking what is political science. We found it is the systematic study of politics, state, government, and power, a discipline both ancient and deeply modern. We trace the word politics back to the Greek polis, the city-state, reminding us that political life is as old as organized human civilization. We studied classical definitions, beginning with Aristotle's insight that humans are political animals, and learned how Plato and Kautilya added their perspectives, and that the existence of a state lies in the welfare of people. Good society, a just society, is the end purpose of the state, and state is the primary institution of the study of political science. We moved into the modern era with Laswell's definition of politics as who gets what, when, how, and Easton's systems framework that sees political life as a process of input and output. Definitely, politics here becomes the process of conflict resolution. Conflict over what? Conflict over limited resources. The demand is greater, resources are limited. That leads to tension in the society. It is the state that addresses this conflict, and therefore politics becomes the process of conflict resolution and political science becomes the study of this process of conflict resolution. We reflected on the nature of political science, acknowledging its scientific qualities while recognizing that interpretive judgment is also essential, making it a blend of science and art. We distinguish between politics as real world activity and political science as its systematic academic study. We surveyed the scope and argued for its importance in the context of in the Indian context. My closing message: political science is not just about government and elections. It is about how human beings organize themselves, how they organize collective life, exercise power, and pursue justice. As students, you join a tradition thousands years old. Thank you. We'll see you in next lecture.